All right, guys, we are in Florence, Italy, and we're looking at the Madonna and Child with Two Angels by Fra Filippo Lippi, 1465. So this is the Quattrocento, and this is tempera paint. That's the type of paint it is, tempera on wood. So this is called Madonna and Child, and it's not called, Mary. It's not called Virgin. So we need to talk about what is the term Madonna besides just this pop culture icon. So it is Italian for My Lady, and Madonna refers to the Virgin Mary, also refers to an idealized, virtuous, and beautiful woman. If you'd like to write these questions on your notes, you can, or if you want to, we're just going to answer these questions on our note pages. We need to know how the artist Lippi is demonstrating humanization, and then what formal qualities show the influence of Masaccio. Masaccio is his teacher. How is Lippi breaking tradition? Like, what is he doing that is different? And then how does he go on to influence Botticelli? So what I love about the Renaissance is you have this tradition of artists. You have like the artists, you have the apprentice, and then you have the master. And that's like the relationship that we have in the artistry business, which is why there's really no female artists that we know of, except for one we'll talk about soon, at this time, because you were living with this person and you couldn't do that if you were an unmarried woman. All right, so we're going to take a break and watch Khan Academy video answering question 1, and then we'll take some notes, and then we'll answer question 2.
Room in the Uffizi, which has 3 giant paintings covered in gold from the 1300s of the Madonna and Child.
Those are so solemn and so steeped in medieval tradition, and this is so playful.
And so 15th century, here we have a Madonna and Child that's really humanist in its approach.
So it's interesting because the other paintings really are very somber, but there is a somber note here too in Mary's foreknowledge of the fate of her son. Nevertheless, the rest of the painting feels very playful, and even her youth and beauty really carry the day.
Well, and gone are those Byzantine elongations of the face and the hands, and she looks like a real woman who you might see on the streets of Florence, a very beautiful woman, but a real woman nonetheless. And not only that, but the angels look like children that you might see playing on the streets of Florence. And it always has seemed to me as though Lippi, when he wanted a model for the angels, went out and found a couple of kids playing in the street and brought them into his studio and made them pose. Look at that angel, quote unquote, in the foreground who supports the Christ child and turns around and looks up at us with a really playful smile.
It's almost mischievous, and Lippi is actually being incredibly mischievous himself. When we look at the other angel, it's only the lower half of his face peeking out below Christ's arms, and it's sort of ridiculous. I mean, you would never have an artist during the medieval period do something like that.
And look what's happened to Mary's halo. Here we are, we're moving toward the high Renaissance, where we'll have the complete disappearance of the halo with Leonardo da Vinci. But here with Fra Filippo Lippi, the halo is becoming just a simple circle that we can just barely make out above Mary's face and also around Christ. And so those obvious symbols of divinity, of holiness, I think felt very much out of place for Fra Filippo Lippi, who wanted to create an image of the Madonna and Child with angels that looked very earthly and very natural and very real.
The frame.
Okay, so here's a recap of what they were just talking about. So how is he demonstrating humanism? If you look back to the past other paintings that we've looked at, the paintings that they were showing you of Mary and Jesus are very somber, they're very sad, they're very calm. And here she's really looking like a real woman, and then the angels look like real children. You guys can summarize this. You don't have to write this word for word. He wanted to create a holy image that felt natural and earthly, so the halo almost disappears. So we went from those like gold discs in the Byzantine that we had to now just this faint little line, and then later in the High Renaissance, they're going to disappear completely. And he's depicting the beauty of the real world with holy people. All right, scandal. We don't need to write this. I just think this kind of stuff in art history is fascinating. So he was an orphan who became a friar, had many numerous affairs with women, which if you're a friar kind of goes against the whole friarness thing, and then ended up running away with a nun. He was arrested because of this, went to trial, and then tortured because of this conduct. It's frowned upon. But hey, he's got powerful friends. So he was released because of his friendship with the Medici family. And then the Pope gave them permission to marry the nun. And there she is. So that's who he used as his model. And then Fra in his name means brother. All right, go ahead and draw that halo on the picture that I gave you. So how has this halo, we just talked about it, how has this halo changed since Byzantine? How is he handling this differently? So this is part of how he's breaking from tradition. And here's another one of his works on the left. So if you compare these two, you can see his similar style. So he has a foreshortened halo that's almost disappearing. How is his work characteristic of the Renaissance? What's characteristic about the Renaissance is the humanization of holy characters. So again, we talked about this with an earlier piece. He's blending classical beauty from the Greco-Roman time period with the medieval spirituality that we saw, that's Christian iconography. So blending those two together is characteristic of the Renaissance. All right, how does he go on to influence Botticelli? So he is Botticelli's like master artist or teacher. So we're going to watch the Khan Academy.
Of a heavenly space, here Mary very much represented as a figure who we can relate to here on earth. My favorite passage in the painting is actually the translucent fabric that she wears in her hair and the amazing lines and curves as that winds down around her neck and comes down in front of her, or even the curls that we see in Christ's hair. There's this love of beautiful curling shapes, and we know that Fra Filippo Lippi was the teacher of Botticelli, and so when I look at that, I can see
that emphasis on the decorative
and on beautiful sinuous lines. And there's a kind of sensuality here that I think is hard to deny. Clearly, yes, the Madonna Child with angels, but a real love of the beauty of the things that we can see with our eyes.
All right, so it is all about that sensuous line, so detailed line work where the line defines the contours. So that's a fancy way of saying outlining, right? But he's not, if you look at Botticelli's version of Venus here, he's not outlining the nose, but he's implying, the shading here with this contour edge, with that line. He's implying, an edge here using that line. Same thing when you look at the work of Fra Filippo Lippi, he's using these lines to define the edges, but not like a thick outline to make it look cartoonish. An emphasis on the decorative elements, the use of transparency. You can see it on both of these versions of Mary in the back. All right, and then something just to add about form, she's in profile, angel in back is barely visible. There's atmospheric perspective happening in the background. It's like you're looking through a window, but the window's also being used to frame the canvas. And then she's sitting, it's almost like she's enthroned still. And then the angel's wings, everything's kind of coming out of that box, that frame of the window. And he's using shading to make it look like she's really sitting there. All right, so at this point, we should be able to discuss or write an essay about the progression of humanization of MJ, Mary and Jesus. So how does each of these different Marys, what do each of them emphasize? So in this Byzantine example, where you have the Virgin surrounded or in between saints, you have the spiritual feeling of Mary. And she's very calm and she's okay with the future of what's going to happen to her son, versus the Gothic Röntgen Pieta, where she's in agony and despair, and you're supposed to empathize with her and relate to her and feel bad, pity her, versus this also another realistic depiction of Mary, but also very playful, more about the beauty of the human form, but then combining that with the Christian iconography. All right, test questions. Lippi's Madonna and Child with Two Angels exemplifies stylistic aspects linked to the Italian Renaissance through its A, incorporation of a landscape model in ancient frescoes, B, emphasis on strong shadows and the frontality of the subjects, Definitely not that one. C, emphasis on angular forms and hierarchical composition. No, we didn't talk about that at all. D, naturalistic rendering of the holy subjects. That is the answer. So if you don't write anything in your notes, just write this whole thing right here. We need to be able to say how this is characteristic of the Renaissance.